Many thanks for joining us on Joy Asonye Live today. Tonight on the show, we confront a tense and urgent moment for Nigeria. In recent days, the United States has formally placed Nigeria on its country of particular concern list for religious freedom, and President Donald Trump publicly warned that the US is preparing options, including possible military measures, if violence against Christians is not addressed. Washington's escalation comes against the backdrop of complex, multi-actor insecurity inside Nigeria, a 16-year insurgency in the northeast, rising banditry and kidnappings in the northwest and central states, and fresh communal secessionist violence that has displaced millions and left thousands dead. Would examine the facts, the Nigerian government's response, the credibility of genocide claims, the possible motives behind US pressure, and what military or diplomatic action would mean for Nigeria's sovereignty and for civilians on the ground. Now, joining us is Sam Mbonu, Washington-based international development consultant and former presidential aspirant, to break down the data, the politics, and the human stakes. Thanks once again for being part of the show. We'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll get to the discussion.
It doesn't take a pandemic or an epidemic to know that clean hands save lives. Hand washing is essential anytime, anywhere to protect your health. So keep washing your hands, not just when they're dirty, but even on the go. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep your hands clean.
Welcome back from that break. I have Sam Mbonu. I hope I'm getting it right.
Mbono,
Mbono. Okay, Sam. Okay, Mbono, right here in the studio, former presidential aspirant, Nigerian presidential aspirant, and I would just like to take the conversation.
Over the past 12 years, if not more, of security tensions in Nigeria. And one would think that perhaps if you're localized within Nigeria, that people outside Nigeria are not keeping track of it. But we live in a globalized world right now. So the information is out there. People have pretty much formed their opinions on what they see going on in Nigeria. So regardless of any kind of face-saving measures that the government of Nigeria might try to micromanage, the truth is that Nigeria is seen as a precarious security environment right now. And that has risen to a level where the president of the most powerful nation in the world wants to take a stake in what's going on. And so we face a situation where, at the end of the day, regardless of the spin that the government of Nigeria is putting to it, the seriousness of the killings that have been going on in the north central area of Nigeria in particular, and then on the other fringe areas, and even in the northwest, where the northeast, where the security challenges first rose to the fore, are such that you cannot. It's like pouring water out of a bottle and then try to take it back.
Right?
You cannot do that. It has risen to a level where I certainly think that something would happen between the United States and Nigeria. It might not be a full-scale military invasion.
Right.
In fact, I think it's going to be much more surgical, and there may or may not be some collateral damages. But the security situation has raised insecurities in Nigeria, risen to a point where, frankly, the mood of the government of the United States today, led by Donald Trump, is such that they don't want to see this continue, and they're going to do something about it. And so that's the challenge that Nigeria as a government have to deal with first, and then as a country that is so diverse that when things rise to the fore in Nigeria, you find that there are divisions in opinions, based mostly on ethnicity and religion itself. And these things create their own peculiar challenges. because at the end of the day, even if you don't want to use the word genocide,
Right.
you could also look at the ordinary definition of genocide and say, a systematic attempt to destroy a people for either national, religious, ethnic reasons. And there's no other way to look at
To
that.
coin it.
That has been happening, and it's not even because the United States that is happening. You find that the evidence of these things are so humongous that even some of the videos that are circulating in the public domain are videos that were created by the perpetrators themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few people in most countries around the world now who may not have seen a video of a bunch of men lined up and their throats being slit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've certainly seen it, and so these things. For those who say that this seems like maybe the United States having other interests.
No,
Uh,
we'll get to that conversation. I just want us. I mean, independent trackers will
mhm,
tell you
mhm,
after a report that about 11,800
mhm,
violent deaths were recorded between 2023
mhm,
to date, and over 2 million internally displaced persons
mhm,
to this day within that time frame. So
mhm,
it's not news
mhm.
that people are dying.
Yeah.
However, I think it's the term genocide that makes a lot of Nigerians cringe,
Mhm,
because is it targeted towards Christians, which
mhm,
was what was mentioned by Mr. Trump? Is it targeted towards Christians? These numbers represent what's happening in the southeast. The southeast does not have a terrorist group against towards an ideology
mhm,
per se, like the Boko Haram, for instance.
mhm,
It also captures what's happening in the southwest. There's banditry, there's increased kidnappings and killings,
mhm,
ritual killings as well. There's cultism. Everything is summed up
mhm.
to get that number. So when the use of a genocide is used, how does it really make you feel, knowing that in truth there were bombings were done, killings were done to churches, markets, and not necessarily singling out Christians?
Mhm. Well, the reason why the genocide term carries a lot of weight in this particular circumstance is that the perpetrators themselves have expressed explicitly
Mm,
that they are on a certain mission.
right.
And when they have said it themselves, it's not like somebody said, somebody said, somebody
Mm-hmm.
said, and it's out there in the public domain. Even if you look at it from the light most favorable to Nigerian Muslims, the non-extremist Nigerian
Mm-hmm.
Muslims, who
Right.
a substantial number of Nigerian Muslims are not extreme, but you find that it's sort of difficult to walk it backwards. So when people have expressed their mission and actually carried it out in front of the whole world and showcased it in front of the whole world, so to back away from the use of the word genocide,
Genocide.
it's extremely difficult. It's not, about me wanting to say that as or anyone else, but it's just there. It hangs in the air. And even if Nigerian Muslims, our brothers and sisters who are moderate, say that Muslims have been killed also.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in fairness to Donald Trump, what he's saying is that, okay, if we're going after people who have killed Christians and then as well as killing Muslims, then why do you have a problem with it? Because, okay, we are trying to take care of a problem that the state here in Nigeria have not been able to take care of.
Mm.
And so if they are also killing Muslims, then and we take care of decimating them, then why are you concerned? Why are you worried? Don't you want us to help solve the problem? So, that's why it's a tough case at this point in time to defend the actions of the extremists. I don't
Mm.
think our Muslim brothers
I don't think
sisters
there's
that
any
defended
sane
that,
person that would defend
that
such
defend that.
actions, right?
Yeah, but and the way the United States operates in this kind of matter, given the capacity and capabilities of their military, as I stated before, it's probably going to be much more surgical than anybody is thinking right
I
now.
mean,
Yeah.
you are saying it's going to be surgical, but the
Mhm.
president of the United States made it clear that he's coming guns a blazing,
Mhm.
and that they're concerned. A lot of people who asked the question, is this going to where would it end?
Mhm.
What Nigeria needs, for some people, for some security analysts in the country would say, institutional support,
Mhm.
intelligence gathering.
Mhm.
We don't doubt that we need support, we
Mhm.
need help,
Mhm.
but guns are blazing.
Mhm.
Are you going to, I mean, who are you going to target for this?
Yeah.
Because remember that this is an ideology,
Mhm.
and the numbers of individuals who follow this
Mhm.
are pursuing an ideology.
Mhm.
Some of those people, you would agree with me, need rehabilitation, reorientation,
Mhm.
need some sort of mind shift.
Mhm.
Children are involved,
Mhm.
but it's scary when a foreign country says, "I'm coming guns a blazing."
Mhm. Well, yeah, I mean, the terminology could connote several different things because, generally the capacity, the kind of capacity that the United States has right now as one of the few superpowers in the world now is that if particular individuals that are identified as people who are truly problematic, the the weapons that can go after those people, a lot of people may not imagine it now, but I mean, we're talking about uh, weapons that have the capacity to basically just hover around a particular person until they get him as a target.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so if that person chooses to bury himself under the ground,
It will be
and never
hovering.
come up, then they're apparently going to die there of some kind of hunger, But yeah, the capacity is there now. Now, in any kind of operation, though, the potential for collateral damage is always there. It can never be ruled out, and so we're talking about incidences of perhaps impact to people who are not direct people that are targeted through such surgical operations. And that becomes a very difficult situation because um, Nigeria is still a sovereign country and still owns its space. And one would think that perhaps there are certain things that are sacrosanct as far as nationhood and sovereignty and all that. But on a practical level, the way the world works is that a lot of times might is right. That is the reason why sometimes even the United Nations can be completely, well, not completely, very redundant when certain actors want to
Right,
act.
exactly. In
Yeah,
spite of the treaties and
yeah. I mean,
pacts and
all those,
agreements,
yes,
we
that's
could
that
sit in general assemblies and accept to
exactly.
anything.
But there are a couple of countries that can get away with all kinds of things, in the world, and those countries can go in certain countries and invade them, even if United Nations or other factors or other nations say don't do it. You're not supposed to do this. If they really
Mm.
see it as their prime interest is at stake, they're going to go ahead and do something, and their motivation may be clear on the surface, sometimes not so clear, but the fact that there are also people who feel that these things have gone so far, and so if no action is taken by people who are in a position to take action, then what happens? I mean, is it laissez-faire? Every day, every year, we're hearing the same cycle,
Right.
cycle, cycle. So at some point, something is going to give, and this may very well be a moment that will now drive a certain kind of action that will even awaken the Nigerian government. Because one of the biggest problems the Nigerian government had in the past 10 to 12 years is that the extremist ideology appeared to have penetrated at very high levels in the Nigerian government.
Okay.
In fact, it's not because I'm saying it. The President Jonathan, who was president a few years
At the
ago,
time,
at
was
one
told,
time,
yeah.
he actually expressed. He said Boko Haram had infiltrated his government
And
because
had sympathizers from,
yeah,
maybe more than sympathizers, but yeah, we had sponsors. It was speculated at the time, but
yeah,
names were not mentioned. Persecutions as we expected it did not happen.
mhm,
Punitive measures were not meted at the
mhm,
time,
mhm,
and again, one asks why.
yeah,
Maybe that's also why a lot of Nigerians felt Jonathan could have done something about the explosion
mhm,
of Boko Haram and the proliferation in other states as well.
mhm.
But I agree with you.
And the thing about it is that because the United States have a defense pact with Nigeria, which allows them to share intelligence with Nigeria, and when they share certain information that have been gathered in a painstaking manner,
Mm.
and that
And nothing is
information
done,
now
right?
goes back to the target, that's a very serious
Mhm.
matter because when that happens, that country also becomes vulnerable by
Mm-hmm.
sharing this information with
Information,
you.
right?
Yeah, and in fairness to the current president, this does not start under his watch.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and so in some ways I see him as being hamstrung, but it requires political will because the last president of Nigeria bungled the opportunity completely. And some say it might be intentional. When President Mohamed Buhari was in power, he pretty much sat on all the opportunities he had, especially given the part of the country that he's from, which is one of the bigger problems we see in Nigeria because people of influence, people who have power in certain regions of the country, very few of them, in fact, I don't recall any right now, that have stood up and condemned the extremism in the manner that it should be condemned.
Mm.
And when you don't do that, in legal training, silence can actually be complicity. Because
Right.
if somebody tells you, um, I had somebody, a killer was found in your house, and you say, well, then there's some complicity there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So those are serious matters that the Nigerian government and the people of Nigeria need to really look in the mirror. This is not a time to pretend anymore, and this is not even that ethnic because it has gone beyond Nigeria. So it's not like if some attack, if a bunch of people from Akwa Ibom, for example, Christians in Akwa Ibom, so fundamentalist Christians, decide to go out and massacre people in a mosque in Akwa Ibom, then it will be a very serious matter
Oh,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah, it will be a very serious matter. And some people in Nigeria say that if such a thing happens, the government will go in a heavy-handed manner
Mm-hmm.
to deal with the perpetrators in Akwa Ibom State. Just like there was this story, and everything I'm talking about is out in the public domain, about a gentleman who was attacked in his farm,
Mm.
and then he tried to defend himself against the attacker and managed to kill the person in self-defense. And then he was charged to court and sentenced to court
Yeah.
for murder, where it should be in ordinary criminal law, that's self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes you wonder what is going on in Nigeria.
There's been several other complicit issues and
Mhm.
situations as well where it seems as if the institution is protecting,
Mhm.
and that, as you have also established, is very concerning to Nigerians. If you are really waging a war against terrorism, against these vices,
Mhm.
but there's also the speculation
Mhm.
that this is very political for the U.S. government, as almost as if to appeal to certain groups in the U.S., like the evangelist group towards elections. Have you heard about that narrative?
Well, yeah, that's always going to be there. The thing is that in the United States, because of the ideological differences between Democratic president and the
And the
Republican
yes.
president, attention towards Nigeria is heightened when there's a Republican president. And, of course, the Christian right in Nigeria have their views. You can only see so many people's throats being slit and not feel some form of empathy. And as it is now, the United States in the past have actually dealt with Nigeria on Nigerian matters with some form of softness, softness. This is a little bit unprecedented because Nigeria officially has a friendly relationship with
With
the
the
United
US.
States. Yeah,
Absolutely, yes,
that's
that's
why
true.
there's the intelligence sharing, there's other kinds of intangible aids. And then the other thing also that is affecting this moment is that the Nigerian diaspora has actually come of age in the United States. For most people who are trained in the diaspora and have had careers there, like for example, a lot of the people that I went to law school with in the United States are either serving in Congress or they are judges or they have other very influential positions. And so when I or any other diaspora professional interfaces with these people, what they end up hearing, maybe views that perhaps will form their opinions. And you cannot take this away from anyone because if these people are your neighbors or your friends from professional schools or people that you've done business with, and they see this thing on TV and they come and ask you what's going on, your perspective is very important because whatever perspective you give them, they bring it to the policy making environment.
Right.
They'll say, yeah, my neighbor is a direct witness to this, blah, blah, blah. And so I have every reason to believe him because I've known him for 25 years. And so the diaspora has become influential to a point where they are starting to affect the US policy toward Nigeria. And I think that the Nigerian government missed opportunities to engage properly with the diaspora, despite the significant impact, economic impact that the diaspora is making in Nigeria, positive economic impact. We're talking about the community that pumps over $20 billion into Nigeria, directly, indirectly,
In
carrying,
terms of remittances.
yeah, in terms of remittances, yeah, and
Okay.
even in terms of business proper. I mean, the average, if you go to places like Lekki in Nigeria, in Lagos, you find that at least half of the properties are being purchased after development from people in the diaspora who try to purchase a vacation home or something. And then you find businesses that are being opened by the diaspora because very few people who are not familiar with the Nigerian terrain can do business in Nigeria unless they are a big multinational, a very big multinational. They can come in and come in with their own army, come in with all kinds of things. But for most medium-sized businesses, they have to carry a Nigerian on board to
What
understand the
exactly?
dynamics. Yeah, and those are the roles that the diaspora has. And it's not even about having a diaspora commission where the head of that commission has very limited ties to the diaspora. Uh, Perhaps they're not trained in the diaspora. Perhaps they not have a career in the diaspora. And so, they see $21 billion, but they don't know how that $21 billion
Million dollar
is coming.
scale, right?
Yeah. So, I think the government, if they really, this is a significant opportunity because anything can be an opportunity to move forward or to move backwards. A glass is either half full or half empty, depending on who's
Who's
viewing it.
viewing it?
Yeah, it's a significant opportunity to engage with people who have, because every diaspora, and especially at the professional level, it's like a mini ambassador of Nigeria. Yeah. So even though there's a percentage of Nigerians who are doing some crazy things, but a substantial number in today's America have crossed to a certain level professionally. They have careers in government, in the military, in everything. And so, if Nigeria were to get it right, they would engage a little closely with their own people who are representing them indirectly. And those could very well influence things such as what we are facing right now.
But did it surprise you? I mean, after that tweet, after that tweet by the Mr. Trump, did it surprise you the geopolitical strategies? We saw Russia coming in defense of Nigeria. We saw China, and a lot of Nigerians are asking, uh, what's playing out? Could the U.S. At this point uh, be using this as access to resources? Why is China all of a sudden so interested? Why is America interested? Why is Russia interested?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Well, the fact is that Nigeria has a substantial reserve or opportunities for rare earth minerals that are becoming more and more important in today's world. But China, for example, can only talk. China does not dictate US foreign policy. And if the United States makes up their minds to go in some way, they don't listen to China.
Right.
They hardly listen to Russia unless Russia is already on the ground with a security pact. And last I checked, Russia doesn't have a security pact
With
with
Nigeria.
Nigeria. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so really, if the US, the United States wants to do this, what China says is not so important to them. The way U.S. foreign policy operates, um, Russia a little bit. If there's already a security pact with an existing, country, which in this case there isn't. So Nigeria having been a friendly country to the United States and having purchased most of their military equipment from the United States through the years, have indirectly or by default put themselves in a position where they need to work tenderly in order to, offset this situation.
Right.
It's a little bit stacked against Nigeria if the United States determines that they have to do something. The magnitude of that, like I said, I keep saying that it's probably going to be surgical because the capacity to keep it surgical, it's there. But at the end of the day, something that is surgical, as I keep saying, may also have collateral impact.
Right.
And that, that's where the unknown is at this point in time,
But
because
speaking about the unknown, I some of us also listened to Senator Ted Cruz discuss this intervention or invasion by the U.S., applauding Donald Trump for it, while in the same vein, speaking about how China has basically taking over resources in African countries, especially Nigeria. We are wondering the connection there. Are you coming now to save Nigeria and ensure resource control, or this is just your genocide claim to have access into what China or what you claim China has access to? So, what would you say about uh, having them spew? And again, Senator Ted Cruz, in the same vein, was seen, would you rather say, hosting the IPOP, not IPOP, the Biafra enthusiasts, I don't know how to call them, but openly also after that. So what would you see at play here? And would you blame anyone who speculates that there's probably more to this claim of Christian genocide?
well, people, legislators in the United States, in the Congress, have their opinions and their vexations about certain issues. That does not necessarily translate to the executive branch. It is a fact that China has sort of burrowed into the ground here in terms of their search for minerals, rare earth minerals. And the way China does business is a little different from the way the United States does business because China, Chinese people can go anywhere. They have this down to earth adventurism when it comes to business. The United States does things in more structured ways. You're not going to have individual, very rarely see individual Americans fly into Nigeria and try to go into Zamfara State or places like that. They're not comfortable with that. But the Chinese could do that. And so if the United States truly wants to do business, it will be sort of at the grand scale where they were trying to, mining agreements with, their corporations, private sector, enter into all those mining agreements, and they're not necessarily going to clear the ground through a military operation for American companies to come in to do mining, because American business is heavily driven by the private sector, while Chinese business is
Driven
driven
by
under the
government.
cover of the government.
Yep.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, you're going to find that the U.S. may just perhaps part of it also the whim of an executive like Trump, who feels like he might need to make an impression. Just like if you've been following some of the news about targeting boats that he feels that are trying to run drugs into the United States,
Right.
there's not overwhelming proof, but he likes that bravado, and that bravado might be part of what's playing out here. It might not be that there's a calculated U.S. business interest in trying to do this in order to pave way for American companies, because American companies are a little more structured, like I said. Maybe they could buy things from a middleman and they might not go into the trenches themselves. And so the Chinese, on the other hand, feel obligated to speak perhaps in favor of Nigeria because they are already here and increasing their presence in Nigeria. And so there's a kind of diplomatic, um, you know, nicety that they have to project about Nigeria. But I think that the United States will not let the feelings of the Chinese stop them from taking a certain action once they're determined to do it.
Okay, well, it's time to go for a short break. We will be right back, still discussing this very important issue of Nigeria's security, Donald Trump's threat of invasion. So much more to discuss. We'll be right back after this.
It doesn't take a pandemic or an epidemic to know that clean hands save lives. Hand washing is essential anytime, anywhere to protect your health. So keep washing your hands, not just when they're dirty, but even on the go. Stay safe, stay healthy, keep your hands clean.
Welcome back from that break. I still have Sam Mbonu. I hope I'm getting it right.
Bono, so,
Mbono. Okay, Sam. Okay, Mbono, right here in the studio, former presidential aspirant, Nigerian presidential aspirant, and I would just like to take the conversation to ask you what you thought of the Nigerian president's response to that threat by the U.S. president, and if you were president, what would you have done, or what would you have said, or exactly what would you say or do differently?
yeah, well, the current president inherited a lot of problems. I'll give that to him that some of these things are not of his making, even though some of the people, some of his detractors say that he used this insecurity situation substantially when he was trying to discredit the prior president before his party won power. So it becomes a kind of is this a hypocritical situation? Now you don't see this anymore.
Right.
But the president, he's in my view what you would consider the establishment Nigerian politician. And these are people who come into office with a limited grand vision of how to move the nation forward. And if you really want to know, the last time Nigeria had a consequential president with an intentional mission was the president of Obasanjo. Everything since after President Obasanjo has been sort of downhill. Jonathan may have tried, but he was hamstrung with so many things.
Right.
President Buhari definitely drove the whole vehicle backwards,
Right.
left the country once after he found it, and then the President Tinubu may have some plans or some visions, but the fact is that he is so hamstrung to the ways of the old Nigeria. And frankly, the ways of the old Nigeria, deal making, trying not to upset people from a particular area so that you can come back and win election again.
Is that
All
what
of
you
this,
perceive?
yeah, that's what I see as part of his problem. And that can only move Nigeria forward in very small increments. And so, in this particular security issue, um, his response to President Trump may not be entirely grounded in the actual facts of the matter. And even if he tries to make it seem like that's what the case is, you can use his own words and his own actions against him. From when they actually came to the United States. I met him in Washington D.C. At the time that they came to put their own case forward and to discredit the president at the time, Jonathan. And so he is not all of a sudden say, "Wow, this is a eureka moment. This problem is not really genocide. It's not Christians being targeted." I remember targeted is the key
The
word.
key
Because,
word,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, because some Muslims have been killed. Yes, I acknowledge that. But the prime target, people who have a target on their back, people are Christians from places like Benue, Plateau, Nasarawa, Southern Kaduna, and you can't hide these things. You cannot hide it. I mean, maybe back before the days of the internet, where people preserve information meticulously, but today, I actually recall a video that was posted by a man in Benue State that was carrying a young child in his arms whose throat had been slit,
Sleep.
and he was saying, "Please, President Trump, do something, do
Right.
something." These things are all
All
over the
over the
place.
place, exactly.
So you cannot. The Nigerian government today is in a very weak position to defend the fact that this is not being targeted or calculated genocide. It's a very difficult situation. And if I was president of Nigeria at some point, as a today maybe as a new generation kind of person, my views will be much more holistic because um, people in my generation, of some of the people who ran for president 2019, the new
Right?
generations, um, they are not establishment politicians with um, ties to power brokers in different parts of the country that they need to please. And at that time, it seemed like the time had not come, but the time has really come where the whole idea of ethnic and religious thinking, it should become clearer that these things are holding Nigeria
Back.
backwards because most Nigerians were born in the night, but not last night.
Exactly.
So the thing is that it's becoming clearer and clearer. You cannot keep appeasing and appeasing and appeasing, and then holding the entire nation down just because you're appeasing people. So there has to be a holistic approach to governing Nigeria today. The whole thing about tribe and religion, and I'll tell you what, my friend Samora Machino, former president of Mozambique, said it best. He said, "For a nation to arise, the tribes must die. For a nation to arise here, the tribes must die." You must get to a point where
You see beyond your tribe.
yeah, you just have to come up with a holistic plan and then execute that plan. And then, the thing about it also is that when you throw it open, then a lot of benefits will come to even people who don't want to work, who don't want to do things. And I see energy, tremendous energy in Nigeria from every corner of the republic. I see very hardworking northern youth that work sun up to sundown. They do all manner of legitimate things. They hustle, they ride bikes, they're in construction sites. And these people, their lives should be going further than where it is right now. I see that kind of hustle also in Lagos. I see that kind of hustle in different parts of Nigeria. And I see a country that has so much energy that if somebody comes and champions, productivity with a certain, without the color of ethnicity and religion, that they will go along with it because they will see the benefits.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I would look at, also because having spent time, substantial time outside Nigeria, when I come into Nigeria, there are some things that are not so obvious to me anymore, like the ethnic group, religion. Those things don't stand out anymore. I don't even know if people who might speak the same language as me might say it's one of their own because they may not get the impression.
Exactly.
They look at me and see maybe something different, and it is really up to Nigerians to be intentional, very intentional. Yeah, because if you want to grow the nation, and there's significant opportunities to grow this nation, the population, the creativity, it's so amazing. And even some of the religious angles that are holding the nation down are even angles that the places where some of these religions came out of are moving away from. Yeah,
exactly.
Like Saudi Arabia actually wanted to emulate Nigeria, and they started a ministry of entertainment. So it's not all about killing and chopping off people's hands and feet
gruesomely.
Yeah, but those things don't holding on to things that are just purely parochial is obviously holding the country backwards. That's why whoever ultimately emerges in the future, it might not be in this next election because I see a lot of impediments even for a new generation candidate in this upcoming election. So let's say perhaps even if the current president wins re-election, but right after that era, Nigeria has to move to an era whereby, a certain level of minimal competence and a certain level of not being tied by the arm on strings of all manner of parochial relationships, where you can't say the truth because you're trying to
You're
appease
afraid, exactly.
a particular faction. So I think the country has opportunities on its hands, and this security situation of today actually can give them an opportunity to take several steps forward towards containing even the insecurity itself and not letting it rise and fester on the world stage where everybody's watching a clip of Nigerians with their throats being slit.
I mean, I want us to go a bit more regional. This isn't a Nigerian thing per se. We're reading and hearing reports about several African countries having internal issues, mostly around security as well. We're seeing what's playing out in Tanzania, in other parts of Africa. How does it make you feel when you see the dear, beautiful Africa with arable land, with beautiful cultures, and you read about these things?
Well, sometimes there can be um, some level of exaggerations about some of these security situations. And so when I read a report about something happening in Tanzania or in Kenya,
In Sudan?
well, Sudan has been a particularly difficult case because Sudan has only been independent maybe 10 years or thereabout, 10, 12 years. And so they have an opportunity in their hands. And when they descend into all of these internal issues, it now makes you wonder what is happening. But you know what it all boils down to? It all boils down to a leadership that is actually leading by example. Because, for example, if the president of Nigeria today were to say, well, I know there's a multi-billion naira budget for Aso Rock, but I'm going to, on my own initiative, scale that budget down because we don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this. We'll scale it down. I'm asking Nigerians to tighten their belt because they're paying more for fuel and things like that. And so I'm going to tighten my belt as well. If he does that, he will be a hero to many Nigerians because he will come out and say, look, I'm not just asking you to do this.
Right.
Look
Going
at
to
me.
reflect in my activities,
Yes.
my life,
Look
my
at me.
lifestyle, and
Look
all.
at me. And that's why I also, when you read the history, for some young Nigerians may not know the history of Obasanjo, but when Obasanjo was leaving power, handing over to the civilian government, at that point, he had banned luxury vehicles for Nigerian government officials. At that time, there was a Peugeot assembly plant in Nigeria at the time, and they had banned luxury vehicles for government officials. And then, among other things, they had tried to create this unity kind of environment by investing in unity schools, the federal schools of today, the NYSC, and all kinds of other tangible things. But you don't
That
see,
improves local content.
yeah, and that sort of
It brings
begins
unity
to
as
create
well.
a
Right.
colorblind and ethnic blind society, and nobody else has done it since then. Maybe Yaradua didn't have enough time to do it. Jonathan, had his situations. Buhari certainly moved it backwards and really did not care a whole lot. And then the current president, President Tinubu, has a significant opportunity in his hands. And those opportunities can actually yield dividends. It's not too late for him to also change direction. But if you don't take care of the security situation and you let it fester and you try to deny what the whole world has seen now, then it makes it difficult to imagine where this is headed. It's better for somebody to admit to a doctor, to a physician,
Right.
that okay, I have these pains here and I have it here. Don't say I have pains only on one side. I mean, it just not being helpful to the entity. The entity in this case being the country of Nigeria. I would say, okay, we have problems. How do we work together?
Right.
How do we work together to solve some of
These problems?
situations? Yes.
Right. I mean, I'll get to your thoughts on your final thoughts on how we can come together and work these problems. But another very important aspect is how all this affects our economy and the drive for foreign direct investment. And our president started his administration with traveling around to tell everyone who cares to listen that Nigeria is not security volatile. Nigeria is ready for business. The bottlenecks, bureaucratic bottlenecks that used to stifle investment is no longer there. And here is our image being seen as one that's driving a genocide against Christians. How does it reflect on our economy and the need for foreign direct investment?
Well, as far as investments go, very few sane people would want to invest in a place where the investments are not going to be secure, one, and where they actually run the risk of their people being physically massacred. And so there's no doubt that that has affected Nigeria as far as investment. Now, the people that are actually perhaps making a bit of an impact because they are bold enough to come to Nigeria are people who have ties and roots in Nigeria. And so those people, they're not they don't see Nigeria as terrible as it represents. Even right now with the security situation that we're talking about things happening in the north central of Nigeria. Somebody can still set up a substantially successful company in, say, Cross River or Imo State or Anambra State or Ogun State or Ondo State.
Did you intentionally leave out the northern states?
No. The northern states, some of them are very viable also because if I want to do business in a place like Kano, for example, Kano has a very
vibrant
big
commercial
density.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of opportunities. Let's say maybe in the agro industry, for example, anyone who goes into the agro business in Nigeria will not go wrong.
Absolutely.
Because
I
there's
agree with you.
250 million or more people to feed. You know, when I go to the restaurants in Abuja or in Lagos or Anambra, there is no restaurant that is not busy every day. You know, we're talking about from sunup to sundown.
Yeah.
You know, and so you find that that kind of industry, it's going to be self-sufficient for a long time. So investors will be wise to invest in areas like that. But when it comes to, let's say, hospitality, for example, is a problem. Is a problem because the places that could attract substantial tourism in Nigeria today, a lot of them are actually in the north. You know, the places that have majestic views that people
and sites
want
that
to
people
see.
should have access to.
A lot of it is in the north, and even the games reserve that Nigeria used to have.
Boast of,
I think it was Niger State or Zamfara State or someplace. But so you find that there's a business side to this to this security thing that would have been an incentive for a government that has political will. Right now, what we'll see is a government where the old style of governance in Nigeria is that whoever gains power now begins to amass and amass and amass and amass more than even their grandchildren would be able to.
Absolutely.
And so when they do this, it doesn't really create that openness that this place is open for business. And then you now add that to the security situation where the average investor is not going to go where they're going to get killed or where they're going to have
their businesses brought down.
Yeah. So they're going to, the hospitality area actually will require a very massive type of investment. There are not places where you go and invest $100,000.
Yeah, exactly.
We're talking about millions. And so you set up, these hotels that should be able to attract. And the thing about Nigeria is this, maybe a lot of Nigerians do not know this, but a substantial number of Black people in the Americas, in the Caribbean, everywhere there's Black people, they all have Nigerian DNA. I would say maybe 70% of Black people everywhere have Nigerian DNA. Yeah. And these people, they have this urge to visit, to come and check it out.
To return home, right.
But the security reports are simply what is deterring them.
Okay, so we really are running out of time. So I'd like you to share your final thoughts for our viewers. What should Nigerians, especially those living in most affected states, expect in the short term, and what can communities do right now to protect themselves, if there's such a thing, and push for accountability that would, culminate to that to be safe, basically.
Yeah, I would say to the Nigerians that live in the most affected regions, the world now knows, and so much more attention is going to be in Nigeria. So you have to continue to put out this information, and it doesn't really matter that you have to have it in the mainstream media. You can put out this information yourself. Videos, of incidents that can maybe create awareness. And once they do that, then you leave it up to the world to now at some point begin a process of taking an action against Nigeria, which is about to happen now. And the government proper...
Against terrorists, you mean?
Yeah, against
terrorists.
Yeah,
right.
Of course, yeah. Because, Nigeria still has a substantial number of good people, great people.
Absolutely.
These terrorists are actually a small fraction, but a small fraction that have done so much reputational damage
absolutely,
that you just cannot ignore them anymore. And
we really have run out of time. Okay, so thank you so much, Sam Mbonu, former presidential aspirant, a Washington-based international development consultant. Thank you once again for sharing your thoughts on the issue.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So this is where we end today's edition of Joy Asonye Live. I hope you have learned so much from our guest who has shared his thoughts on Nigeria's security challenges and the US threats to invade. Well, that's it from here. Until next time, have yourself a wonderful evening.